Some rooms sound like this. What's happening inside?
I think this is supposed to be the noisy room. All right, welcome back to another School Principal Reacts. This is Brandon coming to you here with another very old educational training video. I did one a while back, kind of just for fun, and this is just for fun as well, but you all seem to like it, so I wanted to do some more of this. The other one was, I think it was called something to do with classroom discipline. I'll put it up here if you want to watch it, but this one is called How Quiet Helps at School, and it was produced in 1953, quite a long time ago now, over 70 years ago. And people don't realize this, but public education in the United States is not nearly as old as people think it is. So if you went to school in the very early 20th century, you just had to fend for yourself. There was no universal public education. There wasn't even a cabinet post for the Department of Education until Jimmy Carter, I think. So it's not as old as people think it is. And so you have these very old training videos that had very different ideas about certain things. And so I'm anxious to see what this one's about. I haven't really watched it yet, so I don't know. We'll just have to dig in together again. 1953, very, very different time. And so I'm anxious to hear what sort of ideas get put forth in this video. If you're not a subscriber to my channel, especially if you like my content and enjoy tuning in regularly, whether that's SpongeBob, Victorious, Ned's Declassified, or just kind of random things like this, click the button below to subscribe to the channel. I would really appreciate it. But let's get into this video. How Quiet Helps at School. All right. Stanford University. Okay.
Did you ever walk through the hall at school when the other children were in their rooms?
These are some large lockers. They go kind of from top to bottom, don't they? You don't see this anymore. You really don't see it. And the image of this particular school takes me back to a school that I was an administrator at. It was a historic building, and it was originally opened in 1936. And you had like plaques on the front, which is very common. You have a plaque to the school board members that approved it and the company that built it and in memory of so-and-so. But they had like a plaque to kids that had served in World War II and Vietnam. And so just very different. It's kind of jarring seeing that, but this really takes me back, especially if you look at the big heavy wooden door, which you did have in those days. Nowadays, you just don't have doors that look like this. I'm talking about on the far left here. And I made a comment one time on a review of iCarly. I think it was Locker 239, I believe it was. Check it out if you haven't seen it. I do plan to come back to iCarly at some point because it's a good show. It's not a bad show. But I would comment that you don't see lockers that big. Well, here they are. Here they are right there. Nowadays, I only see lockers like this in athletic locker rooms. In other words, lockers that go from the top of the lockers all the way to the floor. You just simply don't see that. Many schools nowadays, I've said, if you've watched the channel for a while, you know that I mention from time to time that a lot of schools nowadays don't use lockers, even schools that have them in their building for school safety and security concerns. But let's keep going.
Did you ever listen to the sounds that come from the rooms? Some rooms sound like this. What's happening inside? It looks...
I laugh because it's like, I think this is supposed to be the noisy room. Standards have changed, let me just say that. So I've been in a lot of different schools as a teacher, as an administrator, as a principal. But it's each one was very different than the other. But the notion that the sound that I just heard is considered like really noisy is sort of preposterous. In 2026, what people consider to be a loud, disruptive classroom is very different. It sounds pretty tame to me, honestly.
As if everyone is busy at work. But it's so noisy. What makes the room so noisy?
And honestly, and I won't pause it every second or anything. I'm just going to have a lot to say. So this reminds me a lot of a couple of Montessori schools that I've been to, actually. And it's interesting that this is being portrayed as like some sort of negative thing where kids are up and moving around. I remember probably 10 years ago now, or a little bit more, I was an administrator with a district and I would sort of travel around to different schools. I was a school district leader. So, not a superintendent or anything like that, but I did work at the central office and I would travel around and I visited a Montessori school. We had a couple of Montessori or Montessori. If you don't know what that is, check it out. I won't go through and explain it, but they just have a very different model of the fundamentals of teaching and learning, and it's really interesting. And a lot of it makes a lot of sense, but it's just different, and it takes a while for some people to get used to. And this is strikingly like even the classroom layout a little bit. It's strikingly like the school that I visited because I would go in and it was young kids like this. This was a K-8 school, meaning kindergarten through 8th grade. Excuse me. And I think this was like kindergarten, first grade, second grade. They were pretty young, but they were all moving around exactly like this, talking to each other. Now it was fairly focused. You had the teacher and the parapro. In this day, you'd call it a teacher's aide. I remember being in school and it was a teacher's aide. Now it's a paraprofessional to reflect the fact that they are professionals. They don't have the same sort of education as teachers do, but they are there to professionally help educate the students. So he's saying how noisy they are. And number one, they're not really that noisy, in my opinion, at least based on today's standards. Number two, it's not necessarily a negative thing to have noise in the classroom. I had to teach myself that. I sort of had some of those old school ideas in my head coming up as a young teacher and also an administrator. But I had to learn, like, there is a very much such a thing as productive noise. Now, a lot of times it's not. I'm not saying that noise is great all the time. It's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is when I would do observations, I would hear sometimes noise within the classroom. But you sort of have to listen to what is being said, and as you enter the classroom to, say, observe a teacher, which I've done probably thousands of times, you have to look and see what is being done. Are students working in stations, in small groups? Are they answering questions? Are they having discussions? Are they doing little activities like this? That's very appropriate and a lot of times more beneficial than the teacher simply conveying information. Now, I've seen plenty of other times when I go into classrooms and it's just rowdiness and students are being disrespectful and the teacher is on the cusp of losing control of the class. That's a very different situation and is quite negative. But something like this, I'm seeing some good stuff happen here, actually. If you notice just from the body language of the students, it looks like every single kid is focused on something to do with their learning, and what noise is happening is focused on the content. But enough of me talking. Let's keep going.
Well, children don't stay in their own work groups.
Now that's a little different, yelling out.
Sometimes children drop things on the floor.
Okay. Yeah.
They call across the room and talk out loud.
Oh, man. When he said they call, and you see this kid, I think he was working a calculator there, but just the timing of when he said call, that word call, it made me think in my modern context, oh, he's using a phone to call someone, but this is 1953? Cell phones were quite a long way away at this point, but it just looked like, oh, he's calling someone. That's a little interesting, but no, he means calling across the room. And kids do that. I have worked with young kids before. Most of my career has been secondary, meaning middle and high school, but I have worked with young kids before, and they do that. They will do that. They'll just call across the room. Now, that is not as productive.
Betty, can I use your going to stay on? Sure. And you still want to? Yes.
It's hard to think about your own work in such a noisy room.
It's not that noisy, man. It's really not that noisy. He says, such a noisy, like one kid calling out. I would hate for this gentleman or these kids, if they're still alive today, some of them may be, although they would be, quite elderly at this point, to think about this context and then think about the modern context. I would say that in speaking very generally, school systems, or not school systems, but classrooms are somewhat more noisy and more disruptive nowadays. Again, it's not all bad. Sometimes a noisy classroom can be very productive depending on what it is they're doing.
You couldn't learn very much here.
That's right, darling. Well, where did you leave off then? I left off first,
And you couldn't be proud to be.
And I'm noticing also that even when these kids are loudly talking, they're still talking about the content. I'm hearing them talk about where they're leaving off in their book or in their workbook or whatever it is they're talking about. It's funny. It's still about the content. So I don't know how badly I really feel about this here.
Be part of such a noisy room, could you?
oh, boy, so that's a little girl.
Do all the rooms in school sound like this?
No.
Let's visit another room.
Yeah. And that's one of the things about observing classrooms that you learn as an administrator is that you go from room to room, right? Oftentimes, there have been times when I just observe one person and that's it. But more often than not, I would have several people. I would have like a block of time, maybe an hour and a half during the school day where I would go and visit classrooms, sometimes just informally. Other times it would be more formal observations where I would take notes. I would always give feedback, but it wouldn't necessarily be like in the state's evaluation system and so forth. But I would go from room to room, and a lot of times it was a stark difference from one to the other.
Listen. It's so quiet.
Yeah.
Aren't there any children in this room?
I'm guessing yes.
Would you tell us what we read?
Oh, there are children here. And they're all busy, too.
Okay. And on the flip side, I'm guessing he's going to say this is like the ideal, where everybody's completely silent. Now, I will also say, just like I said, that the noisy classroom isn't necessarily bad. Oftentimes it's very good, depending on how productive they're being and what sort of activities are going on in there. By the same token, having a starkly silent classroom, it's not the best for learning to take place, but it's also not true that it's never appropriate, right? So it's not as if I'm saying that if a classroom is silent, then the teacher is doing like a bad job. That's not the case. I often talk to teachers, or have talked to teachers in the past, about a positive learning environment and what that means. Teachers are judged on that. Teachers are evaluated on a lot of different things, but one of them is having a positive learning environment. And what does that mean? So admittedly, a lot of the older teachers that I would speak to, not all of them, just certain ones, would think that a positive learning environment meant something like this, because they had those notions in their head from way back when. I had those notions, right? I had to get out of that and learn what was really effective. But they would think that a positive learning environment meant that the classroom was completely quiet and no one ever spoke up ever. That's not positive. That's I guess, well-controlled learning environment, which is important too. Don't get me wrong. Classroom management is important. However, you want to build a positive culture and rapport with your students, and having an environment where the kids are almost scared to speak because of how harsh you are. I have met teachers before, not a ton of them, but I have met them where they thought that was like the ideal, and that's simply not the case. So having a completely quiet classroom like this is sometimes appropriate, especially in some sort of independent work session, or if they're taking a test. Certainly there shouldn't be any noise happening, but other times discussion is very appropriate and productive, and there are plenty of other activities that are very beneficial that are going to have some noise involved in them. So I'm curious to see what this guy says is going to be like the ideal classroom here.
But there aren't any loud noises.
Okay.
Just the sounds of working.
Okay.
We call these work sounds.
Work sounds.
Listen.
Work
Now,
sounds.
children, let's read just one more paragraph.
And you know that this what I'm seeing here isn't necessarily bad, right? I see a teacher leading a small group. That's good. I see a different group of students involved in independent work of some kind. That's not necessarily bad. Not saying that. Don't want you to think I'm saying that. Now, if this happens 100% of the time, that may not be the best. You have to have variety in what strategies you're using, and students should be allowed to discuss and do small group activities themselves where there's much more dialogue and communication. Especially nowadays, we talk about that with the introduction or the prevalence of cell phones and social media. The kids really need that. They need that to learn the content, but they need that also to develop those sort of communication skills. It is quiet. So quiet. And this also takes me back, these wooden desks. You see these in a lot of very old classrooms. I didn't have these when I was growing up. We had sort of moved beyond that, but you do see these like heavy wooden desks and chairs in classrooms and a wooden floor. Very much an older era of classroom furniture here. I don't know what they're doing here.
All right, you may close your books and go back to your seats. You children may go back to your places, too.
Now, what I like about this, I don't know if it being like very quiet while they're supposed to be working in little groups, if they are. It's what it sort of looked like. I don't know if that's the best, but what I do like about this is it's very organized and she has a procedure that she's taught them, right? We do look for that. Your classroom procedure as a teacher. What have you set up? You should be able to take students through like the first week or so of school. Like, this is how we do this. This is the procedure for going to our small groups or coming back from it. This is the procedure. So you can see once she said, okay, you can return to your desk, everybody picked up their chair. Like they sort of knew what to do, right? And if you don't do that, believe it or not, you'd think, yeah, of course, very simple instructions, but kids will, be unsure themselves and chaos can sort of develop if you're not careful. But that I like about this.
Why do you suppose this room is so quiet?
Okay, let's see.
Perhaps we can learn from the teacher, Miss Bradley.
Okay.
Well, I think it's because each of us helps to keep the room quiet when we're working.
Okay.
But we're not quiet all of the time.
You're not?
No, we know there are times and places to be quiet, and other times and places when we can make noise if we want to.
Okay.
For example, when we play, we make all the noise we want.
All right. So I sort of half agree with this. There are times and places, and you do have to teach students a lot of times, all the way up through high school. Really, some adults still haven't learned this. So yes, there's a time and a place for different things, certainly. But she's saying this almost like as if to say, you can make noise on the playground, but in class, you never make noise ever. That's not quite the ideal.
Sometimes making a lot of noise is a part of the fun of the game.
Okay.
But when we go to the library, we are very quiet.
I mean, that's true. I don't have an argument for that there. I mean, we call them media centers now because and people ask me about that. Why do you not call it a library? So the library suggests that it's only books, which in 1953, that was sort of the case. It was only print materials, right? So nowadays, you started to see this in the 90s where you would have computers much more prevalent in not so much classrooms, but you would have like a computer lab where all the computers were, and they didn't really have computers other places. But you would sometimes start to see them in the library. I remember being taught the old card catalog, and how special that was, and the Dewey Decimal System and all of that. It's sort of obsolete now. I wish I could just take that out of my mind and clear up some other space, but I guess it's good to remember that. But you didn't have other types of materials other than books or print materials, right? But gradually there came different CD-ROMs and stuff like that, and then you had DVDs, the laser discs. I remember those, which are gigantic. They look like gigantic CDs. But nowadays you have all sorts of materials that are not books or print materials. Of course, the media centers are still filled with books, but there are other things too that don't quite fit, the term library, which denotes a collection of print materials. It's all sorts of stuff in there.
Because we know it's a room where we read to ourselves.
Okay.
When we watch movies, we are careful not to make too much noise.
I'm surprised they're watching movies in class. I don't remember thinking that would be the case in 1953, or watching films. I wouldn't call them movies, because movies make it sound like you're just, watching a movie for fun with no educational benefit whatsoever. I do encourage teachers, or I allow them to use clips from things to illustrate different things. That's very valuable. What I don't like as much is just a movie that takes up the whole class. Yeah, there's no benefit there. But I was surprised just to see that here in 1953, them even having any sort of system that would play something like this.
That way we can hear and learn more. And
totally silent.
We have found that knowing when to be quiet.
These kids don't look that excited. Look at them. They're just about to fall asleep, I think.
Quiet is a part of growing up.
Okay.
Offices where people work are busy but quiet.
Again, different time, very different time. Now, I've worked in an office environment before, and yes, it's sort of subdued. Yeah, I mean, people are working, but there's a lot more dialogue and interaction, and this is sort of weird, especially with these people sitting so close together and not communicating at all. This is sort of weird, and I know they probably told them to do this for the purposes of this video, but it's just a little different.
And that is the way we keep our room, because a quiet room helps all of us learn.
How do you do it?
And I'm sorry to stop it so often, but I just have to. So she says, a quiet room helps us learn. Now, I don't want to bash this film too much, because that's sort of half true, right? So there are definitely portions of the instructional cycle or the classroom lesson where you do need that, right? So independent work, certainly when they're taking a test, during direct instruction, if the teacher wants them to get the direct instruction and she's not ready, he or she is not ready for any sort of discussion or questions yet. Yes, of course, but there are many other times. I would say more than 50% of the class should be encouraging content-based discussion and those sort of productive questions and discussion that are so beneficial in class.
Well, each of us knows how to work quietly. That's very important.
Will you show us?
Of course.
Okay.
Boys and girls, how would you like to show some of the ways we know of being quiet?
And the way she says boys and girls, like I see that in films. I guess they wouldn't do that if they didn't do this back in the day. I don't know if I've ever heard a teacher in my life as an administrator especially say that, begin a sentence with boys and girls. I don't know. I've just never heard it.
Yeah.
Well, while we pretend to be working, who would like to show how we work quietly at our desks? Bobby?
Okay. It's just like...
Now, why is Bobby clearing his desk? Oh, now there won't be anything to fall off and make noise.
All right. And I don't have as much comment on this, so I am going to skip part of the video here. I don't need to comment on whether or not you should clear your desk here.
Who would like to show how we work quietly in a reading group?
Reading group.
All right. Bring your chairs up.
Well, there is a quiet way to move chairs, isn't there? There wasn't.
Did you see that? Did you see, that kid took probably 6 or 7 seconds to put that chair down. I don't know if I've ever seen that in my career. Just very, very carefully. I just have never seen it.
Much noise at all. No one was disturbed.
Good to see you all so bright and cheery this morning.
And look, they all have their books with them. Now they can get started with...
Yeah, and you know, some of this again is good. You got the small, they call it a reading group, and then you've got other students working independently. That's not necessarily a bad thing as long as it was based on data. For instance, she knew that these students were going to need this extra help or whatever she's doing with them here, and the other students did not, and you have set aside, let's say, 10 minutes of the class to do this, and then you're going to refocus back to something else. That's not inappropriate.
You can see how quiet helps us, can't you?
Thank you, Miss Bradley. This is a good room, isn't it?
Again, some of the things that I've seen in this good room are fine. You know, I don't have an issue with everything that she's doing, but just the undertones of this film are quiet is good. Any sort of noise is bad, right? Unless it's on the playground, any sort of noise in the classroom, it's bad. I thought it was so funny. The first classroom they showed that was like, you know, not so good was like kind of like Montessori is today, where yes, there's noise, but it's very productive and people are doing things and they're up moving around and they're talking to each other about the content. That's sort of the ideal to me. This classroom, I think the teacher, if this teacher were teaching now, not that she would be bad, okay? I don't want to make you think that I'm saying that, but there are a lot of teachers that I met earlier in my career that were sort of at the end of their career that had these sort of ideas, and they just, some of them just couldn't do it. I would show them, and they could not break away from that because it's, this phrase comes up a lot in education, but, oh, it's what I've always done. It's what I've always done. Or I've been a teacher 30 years and I've always done this. I've heard that many times, but kids change, society change, kids change, society changes, and what kids need in order to learn changes. And so we must change our teaching strategies or else they will become ineffective. I've had plenty of other teachers, okay, who were veteran and had some older or more antiquated ideas that were not effective that said, oh, okay, well, I'll just change this. And they were great. They were fantastic. So it depends on the teacher. But she says that quiet helps us learn, which, again, if you're needing focus or it's an independent work time, that's fine. But the underlying message of this film was quiet good 100% of the time and noise bad 100% of the time unless you're on the playground. That's so funny.
Make your room a quiet place for work.
All right, I guess this is the end here. The end. Coronet Instructional Films, which I haven't heard of. There's other ones on this channel that there's other ones that I've seen online that I'll probably get to that were produced by companies that still produce content today, like McGraw-Hill, I think was the one that did the previous video that I looked at. But this was a great little look at a blast from the past. Not my past at all. I was not around in 1953. I wasn't a glimmer in anybody's eye yet, but great little look at some very antiquated notions. Let me know what you thought about this or my reaction to it. I would appreciate giving the video a like, and most especially, if you're not subscribed to the channel, do subscribe using the button below. Let me know what you thought in the comments also. But I'm going to end the video here. I'll see you on my next video here on School Principal Reacts. Thanks for watching.